It's Jeff Mayhew. It's John Beatty. It's Politics and Parenting, where we talk about politics, but we talk about it differently. John, if you were a candidate, what would you do about this border situation that's going on?
I think we'd have to first enforce our laws where, if you come to this country, you have to go through an immigration process. So I think at the very least, we have to follow what's on the books. And I think that's a problem we find in society where people don't respect the law. They don't revere sort of the policies. Even if you don't agree with them, if you think they could be fixed, I think we can look at that. I know we talked a little bit on the campaign trail last time was the thought of maybe having like an Ellis Island again, but maybe putting in Texas or Arizona, California. There's a lot of spots in there you could find the space. Just the idea to like that's the point where everyone goes because when you don't really have a clear point of entry, everything kind of becomes a point of entry. Like if you've got a balloon and it's a lot of pressure on it, and if you push it in all sorts of directions, it just gets misshapen and then eventually it pops. And I think we're at the point where our immigration process is busted and it's burst. So we need to have an outlet for all that energy of people wanting to come to our country. I mean, like I remember I don't remember because I wasn't alive, but my great grandparents came to this country and I'm grateful they had that opportunity. I'm grateful that there was a way for them to become United States citizens, a process for them to follow. And I think that's the first thing is getting back to following our current process so that we can work to fix the bigger issues. That fact that we are a nation of immigrants. I think everyone recognizes that there were no ever, everyone came over to these American continents at some point, and we need a way to allow people to become citizens and to teach them about our system so that they can become a part of it. I think that's a big part that's missing as well. Is you don't have an incentive if you think you're a fugitive. We want someone who's in this country to go on that path to citizenship, but also to embrace what it means to be American, to be a self-governing person, a
Right.
virtuous person.
Well, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head is, what are we as a core is we're a republic. Montesquieu would say that the principle of government that we have is virtue, a reverence for law and order, in order to preserve liberty. And, you say he would define the love of a republic as or the love of virtue as like the love of the republic, just itself, understanding that you don't have this other authority. You are the authority essentially as the citizen. And then yeah, we gotta enforce the rules, man. Like we gotta have rules. They need to be clear and concise. We need to enforce them. And then I think, we need to look back, like we've got this massive, massive problem going on in the country. And I would argue it's been an ongoing problem for decades now, where there's a rise in border crossings and lowering border crossing depending on who's in charge, and Congress just doesn't do anything about it. Plain and simple. Like I remember it was back when Obama was in office, and there was like McCain and I think Rubio, and they were like working on this immigration deal, like the Gang of Eight or whatever, and it kind of got blown up. And then that's pretty much as far as I can remember. I think that's the closest we've gotten to an immigration deal, and that's almost 10, 15 years ago now. And our leaders are just yelling at each other. They're just complaining. Like one of them saying open borders, and the other one saying, you know, we need to build a wall. And it's like, whoa, hold on, guys. Can we find? And I know this is a strange word for people in our government to hear. Can we find a compromise between these two positions? Like, is there
Mhm.
somewhere in the middle? And it's like, I'm not even against building a wall, right? Like, I mean, I think border security is very important. I don't necessarily think we need a large wall from sea to shining sea. Strategic walls, hiring more border security people, technology, surveillance, stuff like that would be helpful. But I think the biggest thing, like you talked about, you've got to give like a place to release the pressure. You need to give people a point of entry. Everybody knew that they were going to Ellis Island. That's how you got into America. And
Yep.
therefore, it was easier for us to control as a nation. And, there's no reason we can't do this with our southern border. I actually, I think that we should get Mexico to give us the land, okay? And that's where Ellis Island. We don't even have to give away any of Texas to create this Ellis Island. We'll just get Mexico to give it to us because it's beneficial for them as well.
Well, no, I mean, if it's our thing, it should be our thing.
I'm
I know
joking.
that's some people want to Mexico to pay for everything, but I think if it's going to be our system, we should own it. But like you going back to the Gang of Eight compromise, someone I was listening to a podcast just this day today on the way home, but there isn't an incentive to have um, Congress to do anything because it just means that someone's gonna get upset back home and they're gonna get primaried and no one wants a primary, so they much rather just kind of kick the can down the wall, do things in secret, and then wait for 11th hour panics where they got to get some spending done, and then they just sort of tack on as much as they can so that legislation gets passed, but there isn't the transparency that people demand. So we had the continuing resolution this past week, and like who knows exactly what's in that. Then it gets labeled as a clean bill, but I can only imagine how many things that were in there that would probably upset a number of people if really knew. But that is the nature of legislating, is you got to make compromises somehow. But I think like getting like the 70% of the country onto one page and sort of coming up with something that works for a majority of people is going to be beneficial. And then again, maybe Mexico can build the airport or something on the other side of our new Ellis Island. But it is just a way for us to get people on there. I mean, like you think about Ellis Island, there's sort of that romanticism of going back and looking at your ancestor's name that's on a ledger book. It's really simple, but it is kind of, that's when you commit to becoming a United States citizen. You go down that path of citizenship, and then maybe you stay in New York City, maybe you move down the East Seaboard, maybe you move out to the Midwest or all over the country. I mean, like, but that's that decision that we don't give people, other than like they're in such a bad situation back home that they feel that their only option is to hire some coyote, cross the border illegally, and now they're in another bad situation where they can only take jobs that are under the table. They don't have the protections that a regular worker would have, so they get abused. I mean, did you hear about the Cheeto factory? It was hiring underage children to work the factory, and it was like under some
I heard something about a factory. I didn't know it was Cheetos. Really,
I think
Cheetos?
I think it was like flaming hot Cheetos too. So these poor kids were in a really bad situation. But the department, I don't know what department it was, but they were getting put in there, and they were underage workers and didn't have the protections, but they were asylum seekers, and they're again, like, it's a bad spot when
That
we
shows
can't
two
help them.
issues though, right? Because that shows that our businesses are lacking labor, which means we need immigration, and it shows that a lack of rules leads to bad things. Sorry,
Yeah.
I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's again, we're not following the laws, and because of that, we get more people coming across the border than we can handle. I think another thought that you got to do is you just need to hire more judges. I mean,
Oh my
the
gosh.
the reason that people get let go, and they sort of like they get a court date, in a couple months, and say we'll come back on that date, but it's because there's like a backlog of cases. So if we ourselves don't have the manpower to manage the influx, how can we even have this process where we say, oh yeah, just quote seek asylum,
Well,
and
that, that's the thing with creating an Ellis Island, right? Is you create the infrastructure to handle the people coming in, right? So like I don't know what type of space you would need, but let's say you've got basically apartment buildings for all these people to stay at temporarily while they're getting um, you know, processed and like I know that Ellis Island, it didn't have apartment buildings and people kind of just got processed through in the same day, but it's a different time, right? Like we don't want to
Mhm.
let gangsters and drug smugglers into our country. So instead of having just like a 1 day processing, you've got like maybe it's like a 2 week process. You come in through and you get let in, you get assigned a dormitory, you You stay there for a couple weeks, you have your court dates, you maybe you attend education. Like maybe you
Hmm.
do like a citizenship thing like there. And those who are prepared and study before they get there, they're going to get through the process quicker, right? And this encourages, this encourages the best of, the southern countries, Mexico, El Salvador, wherever, people are coming from to come in here. This is encourages the best of them to come and get through, right? And so now, because you have good and bad people trying to cross the border. Now, if all the good people think that there are fair rules for them to get in and they're going to be treated fairly and they're going to have the opportunity that they really want, and there's a safer way to do it, they're going to go there, which now makes it easier to spot all the bad people trying to cross
Right.
illegally. And so now all that money that you spend in security, wall, and manpower is now spent more effectively. And this is just, I mean, it's just like basic business, right? It's like basic life. It's like you have a problem, you need to give it your attention, and then once you give it your attention, you have to feel like, well, how do I solve the problem? We have this influx of people. How do we get them through in the process? The answer is not to just say, come on, let's go, because that's a terrible system. We saw like in New York in 2021, there's this famous, it's going around Twitter all over, where it was the governor of New York was like, we're a sanctuary city, bring it on. And now they're like, stop sending illegals to our country or to our state because we can't handle it. We're full. New York is full. And it's like, really? I thought you were a sanctuary city. Maybe you didn't understand the severity of the problem.
Right. No, no, it's bad. I mean, again, like it goes back to the fact that there's no incentive in Congress to really try and tackle it other than, you can fundraise off of the
Well, that's the
making
key.
people angry about it.
And hey, speaking of anger, right? So like in Montesquieu, as I brought up earlier, so he says, uh, despotic government's principles is fear, right? And so like the whole idea that a candidate runs ads with like the border crossing and like rising crime, like that's a despotic leader, like plain and
Mhm.
simple. They are leading on fear. They could lead with an idea to solve the problem, but they're not. They're leading with, this is a problem, vote for me because the other guy is bad and he's making you unsafe. And it's like, but how are you making me safer? What are you doing to make me less scared? You're just making me more fearful.
Yeah, no, and it's a totally emotionally manipulative, and it's doesn't treat the people you purport to want to serve as real individuals. You just treat them as sheep almost, I'd say, and that's the worst way to ever try to become a leader. Is just to I don't know, put people down.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate, but it's just kind of the way that things go nowadays. But the immigration issue. So, all right, let's say that we create an Ellis Island. All right, 2 weeks, dormitories, citizenship tests, background checks, um, training, maybe. Like, I mean, or like maybe moving people up and down the list based on like what jobs are needed in our country, right? Like maybe there can be a process of like how to get these people to the right states where people need help. Like certain
Mhm.
states maybe have higher unemployment rates than others, and certain states may have a need for like certain types of employees. Like we can match them together and then better help our country, like I tell people all the time, like what business needs to grow is people. It needs labor, right? And in a lot of circumstances, labor is really expensive in our country, and that's because, what happens when the prices goes up is because it's there, it's supply and demand. So if the cost of labor is high, that means the cost of goods will be high,
Mhm.
and that means that the economy is going to struggle because the companies aren't going to be able to grow. They're just going to be stuck in this perpetual cycle of paying for high labor, having high cost of goods, but never being able to scale larger to lower that down.
Right. No, it's a bad cycle. Um, so we're talking about it. Hopefully get more people to talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe we get someone in Congress to talk about it.
Yeah, somebody in Congress, they will talk about it until they leave Congress, which might be at the end of their life, which is
Speaking,
term limits, right? Like that's another thing we should be talking about. We're talking about immigration, or trying to solve it, but something our leaders don't talk about, and because it doesn't drive the fear of the citizens, which means it doesn't drive voters to the ballot box, is term limits. But we just saw this week, Representative Dianne Feinstein passed away. She was in her 90s. She's had lots of health concerns over the last few years, and she passed away while still in office. Um, it's kind of hard to believe that she was still functioning as the representative for her district at the stage she was in with her health concerns. But it's also concerning that she refused to retire. Like, I don't know if that power is supposed to be like consistently in one group's hands.
no, I mean, like it shouldn't. And I used to be kind of, I've come around on this issue. Like I used to think like, oh, we want the best and the brightest, and we don't want to limit that. But as you get to know more politicians, you say, well, I'm okay limiting the people we've got in office as it is. But I think what really kind of sold it for me, I believe Florida has term limits for all their elected representatives. And I don't know, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but maybe it's maybe 8 or 10 years. Um, but that's the kind of thing, like you get a lot of you get a lot of turnover, so you get fresh voices in there, but you also don't have people that stick around in a mass power that don't have to worry about the next election because they've got whatever it is back home that's going to keep them in office, and so they can spend more time work in the halls of their elected body. And so somewhere like Florida has no debt at all, no state income tax, but they have a balanced budget every year, and that's because there's people in there that are looking out to serving their constituents rather than themselves. And
Right.
so that once I kind of discovered that, that sold it for me. Like we would absolutely need term limits. I think we'll figure out the time length, and I think what some point we mentioned probably 12 years for House of Representatives, and you kind of thought forever for senators, but
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I mean, I
you know
think
I,
I think there's always good in blending things, taking a little. I mean,
mhm.
that's our government. We're a blended version of a monarchy, a republic, and a democracy, right? The executive functions as the monarchy, the Senate functions as the aristocracy of the republic, and the House functions as a democratic aristocracy, electing representatives. And um, having that blend is good. You get different voices in the conversation. You If you have term limits of 12 years in the House, you know, um, you're turning over the power that's closest to the people. But having no term limits in the Senate would mean that you're allowing experience to continue to gain. So
Mhm.
like I like to tell people, power held is power gained, but it's also experience. And you want a group of your leaders to be very powerful because they have to face other very powerful leaders in other countries, and that's kind of how we have to, ambition must counteract ambition. We must think of these things in order to keep our country safe and sovereign. So again, blending the two together, putting term limits in the House, allowing the Senate, because now the House can check the Senate. That's its job anyways, right? The
Right.
House represents the people, the Senate represents the state. If the state gets out of line, the people can hold them accountable, and then you have an executive that's already has term limits as well. So now you have this one body that can't really do anything on its own unless it's, has the other two consenting. And if the other two are limited, now it's not going to allow, I don't know, a long-term abuse of power by the Senate, because it would be combated by the other two houses or
Yeah.
powers.
No, and I think perhaps tempering that is maybe some kind of age limit or something where, or some kind of
Yeah, I think an age limit
cognitive
would be
test.
appropriate. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think an age limit both for the Senate and the presidency. I
Mhm.
think that you have to be of sound mind, and it's not to say that, as you get older, you're not necessarily of sound mind, but it becomes harder to know which of us fall off of that and which of us
Right.
stay sharp. And it should only be fair that the people shouldn't have to answer that question. It's like, all right, 60, like, I don't know, 65. I mean, there's a retirement age, there's a social security age. Why are you becoming the most powerful person in the world post social security? Like, this is
Well, you could argue the
twilight.
Social Security age is sort of a holdover from like the Bavarian or the Prussian model where they're trying to create jobs for younger people. So it's not, I mean, like there's the sort of, working in a factory past 65 is one thing. But I think, again, going back to wisdom and experience, you do kind of want that in a governing thing. And it's a strong human tradition of the elders, being in charge and governing. So yes, you might be collecting Social Security past 65, but I don't think that precludes you from being in a position to make decisions for a large body. Because I think, if anything, you kind of do want
Well,
some wisdom. Yeah.
what age would you? What would be an age limit that you would propose?
Probably 80. I think 80 is a solid, like,
Wow.
yeah.
See, I mean, we need to bring a doctor on, and we need to talk about
Mm.
this, because I think, like, the cognitive decline of humans starts before 80, especially depending on, like, how you have lived your life previously. And again, like, we're not going to know as voters what's going on inside of that person's head. They can seem sharp because it's all practiced and rehearsed and whatnot, but what we want is when they're not practicing and they're not rehearsing, to be very sharp so they can govern properly. And I feel like 80s, I think it's just too old. I think I would go, I'd say 70.
Hmm.
Like, I think 70, like, I just don't know. I mean, look at our founders. None of them were in their 70s,
Well, so maybe that's the other thing too. Like, it has to kind of ratchet with the expected life rate too, because it's a totally different
Yeah, but the length
medical
that
system now.
but the length that people live is not really any different than it was during our foundings. I mean, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both lived into their 80s, right? They lived a pretty long time. A lot of our founders did, but they walked away from it, and before they got to that age. And I think it's because they knew that they were starting to decline, and they understood that it was like, you have to have a very, like, sharp mind in governing, because governing is essentially debating. You got to be able to listen, and you got to be able to respond. And if your mind is clicking just a half a second slower than everybody else's, it's going to be hard.
No, I mean, I could see that. Um, yeah, no, that's a good point. I think overall, though, people live longer now, and I would say, like, you look at um people in their 70s, they're very active. And there is an argument too to, like, raise the retirement age. I know many people don't want that, but I think like, we do kind of recognize that in your 70s you still can be active. So um no, I think, I don't know, I think 80 gives you sort of a nice cutoff where once you're past 80,
All
there's
right, I'm
no issues. But
I'm willing to make a compromise. Let's meet in the middle. Let's go 75.
75, all right.
Yeah, that's how it's done, people. That's it. Now, if there's the age limit, it's 75. He
75.
started at 80. I started at 70. We're at 75. I feel like we got a good balance there.
See, that's why we just bring this to Congress and we'll fix all the problems there.
So you brought up Social Security, and I know we weren't going to talk about it today, but I think it is. I'm just curious. What would you raise the age of Social Security or the retirement age?
I think we have to. I mean,
I mean, just
I think it's,
like,
yeah,
we don't have money, right? We're
yeah.
broke. We don't have money to pay out Social Security. I think raising didn't they just do this in France?
I think, what did they do, like 6 months or something, like, or a year? Like, it was very small amount, and there was riots about it. Like, it it's one of those things, like, you just
You
have to
wouldn't
do. Like,
think
there's
old people would get out and riot over this. Or were they out there in their were they out there
it's the
with their
people that are like
canes and rockers?
3 years from retirement that don't want to wait another year. I think they're the ones that are throwing stones.
I'm gonna
But
get
it's
emails
it's
about
just,
this.
I think like that's the other problem too, is that like people just kind of put their heads in the sand and say, well, we could borrow our way out of this or anything. But you do have to kind of acknowledge the reality that you live in, and what you're dealing with at a particular time, rather than what is some idealistic thing that you hope that you might be in, but you're not quite yet. But maybe it'll just sort of happen, and you get some unicorns and rainbows. But like,
Yeah,
you know,
they're just it's
so
the United States functions as like an entrepreneur, like Elon Musk, right? It's like I'm full go all the time, and it's somebody with money will bail me out because they know
Mhm.
eventually one of my ideas is going to catch fire and I'm going to become rich. It's like Vanderbilt, like Carnegie, like Ford. They were all that way, right? They all understood their power and they weren't really afraid because they were like, somebody's going to give me money. And that's kind of how the United States operates, except what happens when there is no more money? Like what happens when like you've siphoned all the money to the countries that don't like you and they're
Mhm.
like, you know what? Guess what? We're not giving you anymore. Now you're going to have to suffer because now it's not about, the profit we make off of you. Now it's about the power we hold over you.
Yeah. No, I was actually just reading about the Belt and Trade thing that China was doing. I don't know if you know about this, where they would like loan money to developing countries. But apparently, like, a lot of the projects were unsuccessful because the contracting wasn't done well.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Um, and then, I guess, like, once you have, like, you build a port or something that isn't really usable and you've got a whole debt load, then you default on it, and then the Chinese take it back. And so, like, we're kind of, you're in a bad situation where you are at the mercy of your creditors, and if they don't really care or do want to lord it over you, they have that kind of control where they can make you raise taxes, make you not spend money on things that you need to, perhaps like a military or
Ooh. So back to Social Security, what would you raise it to?
I think it's got to be gradual. And I think it has to go to like 70. I just think like you look at people these days. I think like people are just living longer, working longer. And I think like I think 70 has to be your long-term goal. Now, how fast that happens, and sort of what carve outs there might be for that, I think, um we got to work on that. I got part of the argument with the French pension system is like you work incredibly hard, and then you're basically done by the time you're in your early 60s. So you don't have much more to give at that point. But maybe it's, if you're a blue collar worker, you retire at 65, and if you're a white collar worker, you gotta wait till you're 70.
See, I don't know. I mean, I don't like that idea because that separates people as far as like the value of their work. And I mean, work is hard regardless, whether you're white
Mhm.
collar or blue collar, whether you're putting in um, physical labor or mental labor, it's still labor. Um, Now, yeah, it's tough because like I sympathize because like I'm 38 and I'm ready for retirement. Like I'm tired all the time. So like I can't imagine what it's gonna be when I'm 60. And then the idea of having to work till I'm 70 is like, do I even want to live that long? Like like where, we talk about incentives, like where's my incentive as a citizen to like
Mhm.
be a good worker or a hard worker if I'm gonna have to work till that? I mean, obviously you can save and you can retire early, and that should be the focus of most citizens. You shouldn't be, I mean, especially now, you should not be relying on Social Security. I don't believe it'll be there when I'm 70 years old because it's not really there now. So um, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the age should be on that. That's something I really need to like think about. Maybe talk to somebody in that age bracket a little bit more. I mean, my grandmother, she's of that age. She's been retired for years, but um she stays active. Like she volunteers, she works. And I think
Mhm.
that's part of like maintaining a healthy body is like work is actually good for you. Where it wears you down, but it also builds you up. And so I think that there are, positives to this as well of raising that. Maybe if you raise the work age or the Social Security, people work longer. Maybe they actually start to live longer.
Possibly. I mean, really, what you got to think about it like, what's the purpose of raising the age? It's so that you're not paying out as much for someone's life. Because, if someone retires at age 65 and then they live for another 30 years, like that's 30 years of paying them every, you know, uh, paying them through the Social Security. So by expanding that age, then it means it's fewer payments over their lifetime. So like that's the goal. So then the other thought you might say is, well, if we don't want to raise the retirement age, then we have to find the money somehow, and then it's a matter of raising Social Security taxes on payroll
Oh,
and
I have a
um,
great idea. So here's what we do. Okay. So immigration. Now, when you start to funnel the people into the country and they're coming in legally, you know what they're going to do immediately? Pay
pay tax,
taxes. And you know what we could do with that tax money?
pay for Social Security.
Pay for Social Security. Boom, problem solved. We've done it.
Done.
We've done it, John. It's so simple. It has to work.
And then start paying off the debt.
Well, you know what's going to happen though. Like the moment you do immigration, every single congressperson that signed the bill and saw and it, within a year you see the improvements of our country because like this makes a lot of sense, right? And so like
Mhm.
every congressperson that signed that bill, they're going to be back in Congress trying to use that tax money for pet projects in their district. That's what's
That's
going to
right.
happen. So whenever we do the immigration bill, John, we have to make sure that we protect it and protect the tax money that so it goes to the appropriate sources. So we don't have all these. What did they? It's pork, right? Is that the
Pork barrel
term?
spending, yeah.
Pork barrel
It's a
spending. Yeah.
there was some euphemism. It's earmarks is what it used to be called, but there's some
Yeah.
like new community funding or something.
Oh my God.
Mm.
They just, it, there is a very good quote by Alexander Hamilton that would fit this perfectly. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it is right on this topic. Shoot, I'm forgetting it now, but I'll look it up and share it maybe next week.
I mean, it's just a matter of it, as we like to say, it's just the grift. You got to find your grift, and
Yeah, everybody's got to find their grift. I mean, that's what America is now in a lot of ways, or at least I would. Okay, let me take that back. America is not a grift. Most people have no idea how grifty the politicians are, but if you live in intellectual America or you live in political America, then it's a grift. Plain and simple. And that's what's happening.
so well, we've again
Regular blue
solved.
collar America has no idea. They're just like working so much and they're so tired and they're just like, why is everything broken? That's where we come from.
And we fixed the problems. We fixed two problems tonight. So
Yeah. Yeah. We fixed two problems. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is the type of stuff like people should be talking about, like, and
mhm.
solving those problems. And they should be doing it in Congress. Like, we're just two dummies on a podcast, right? Well, maybe we're not dummies, but we're just two guys on a podcast and thinking about different ways and how we approach the subject matter is just like from the past, right? It's like there's been a lot of really smart people in our country.
Yeah,
We are so blessed to live in this country. We have so much freedom, so much opportunity, and that was all created by really smart people that lived before us. And so like when you start to look at like the problems that you have in society, look back. How was it solved before? How can
mhm.
we apply that to today? Like really good leaders, like even in the past, like Madison, Adams, Jefferson, that's what they did. They looked back. Madison studied Montesquieu, right? And that's how we ended up with our blended, republic. And so you go forward and you look at Teddy Roosevelt, like Teddy Roosevelt literally wrote a history book while like in his ascent to the presidency. He in between like becoming the police chief and running for office in all these different places and then being vice president, he literally wrote a book of history. Like that's how much the leaders of our country studied the past, or at least the successful leaders of our country studied the past. But
Mhm.
like you look in Congress and you look at our presidential candidates, right? I mean, are any of them really history buffs? Do they talk about the history at all? do they understand it? I mean, certainly I don't believe that Trump does. DeSantis probably, but I don't really hear a lot of it. Vivek, I don't know. I mean, he's so slick. I mean, why would he want to bring up history? Um, Biden, like, I mean, Biden's been in politics forever, and I don't think I ever hear him talk about anything from the past, except for his
Only
like,
his past. Yeah, that's right. Only his past. I was
so
suffering from colds here.
I know it's that time of season. My apologies.
No, I think, and also, you can learn from what people, successful people did, but you can also see people's failures
Ooh, that's a good one.
and see, like, I think we're kind of in this, our current time period. People think that like it'd be fun to have a revolution, and I think it's important to read history and realize that like revolutions are serious business and they usually fail, and they only work when you've got like real principles behind them. I think most revolutions fail. I mean, you can think about the Civil War was, in a certain sense, the South looked at it as a revolution, but because it was founded on such uh, backward ideas, like it couldn't last. And I think our revolution was unique in that it was sort of a recognition of what was there rather than sort of trying to rechange everything. And if you look at like the French Revolution, they were trying to reorganize society, and our revolution was sort of just recognizing that had grown up and we didn't need to
Yeah,
be tethered to the mother country.
yeah,
And that's,
yep,
that's why it was successful, and that's why it could survive for the, what is 5 or 6 years of British occupancy in the North American continent, and we were able to withstand that and get out of there, and then and then work on a constitution that again wasn't, it was groundbreaking in what it said, but it was really also a reflection of where we were at the time. Um,
well, I
a
mean,
self-governing people.
Madison, he says like, what is what is government but a reflection of human nature,
Hmm.
right? And so Montesquieu also, he talks about a republic. In a republic, if you elect wise men, then the country will be governed wisely, and if you elect happy men, then the country will be governed. Then the people will be happy. And it's like what they're telling us is like the government shapes the people, kind of like parents shape the kids, right? And if your society is struggling, or it's a reflection of the government, it's in and the government is a reflection of the people, and so as a nation, as a union, we need to recognize that and start to like pull back a little bit and look back a little bit and try to understand who we are, who we're supposed to be, because I think there's just a lot of people just misunderstand. They
Yeah.
misunderstand the rules. They think that everything's a right now, and the idea is that's not a right. I mean, you look at our founding, and we instituted these rights, but part of the reason that like we had the revolution is because Britain was infringing on the rights that they had already given us.
Yeah.
Like we as an Americans, or British colonists at that stage, we understood that our freedom and the things that we loved about our country were actually given to us by Britain, kind of like a parent, right? So like the parent protects the child, it raises the child grows up, and now it wants to be free and independent. And Britain was like, no. And it wasn't even that we wanted to be independent. We just wanted to be part of the responsibility. We wanted a little bit
Right.
of representation. We wanted a little say. And because they refused to give that to us, we were like, look, you can't give us rights and then take them away from us. That's not fair. We're now entitled to those rights, and we're going to stand up for them. And that's where we are in society, where we have these rights that we were born with. We don't understand that those rights are a responsibility, and then we just try to turn everything that we want in our life into a right. And we just say, like, healthcare is a right. It's a right. Why is it a right? Like, what gives you that right? And why do we need it? And like and it's not to say that, hey, look, if you want to make healthcare a right, okay, but find a way to actually make it a right where it's not detrimental to the country, like economically, and so we can help people, but otherwise it's not really a right anymore, and it never really was.
Yeah. No, it's there's so many people think that whatever they want is a right, and it's so easy to shoehorn those things in there. But then you don't, if you know, again, if it is going to quote be a right, you also have to recognize that responsibility. And I think that's the other flip side, that we need to do a better job educating on that. You know, whatever you declare as your right also means you are taking on a responsibility with that. And so, I don't know, if you're
Right.
going to claim healthcare as a right, that means you have to live a healthy life and allow other people to have healthy lives as well.
Well, and that's the other thing is like, when you, especially when you open up healthcare, like healthcare is in a lot of circumstance is elective procedures.
Hmm.
They are, medication is elective. Like we can sit here and disagree, and I will, about like the medication we give people for like that go to therapy, like psychotics and stuff like that. I mean, I don't really think that stuff is helping, and I think if anything, it's making the problems worse. We see a rise of medication in our society nowadays. And then, like, what if somebody has complications from an elective procedure to, for their vanity,
Hmm.
for lack of a better word. Um, or maybe they don't want to be a man anymore and they get a gender assignment surgery, but maybe I don't agree that that should be a thing. Why should I then be forced to have to participate in a system that pays for it? Why does somebody else's desires get enforced on me, the individual? Like, again, I'm not saying that you can't come to some sort of like situation where healthcare is a right, but there has to be a debate about it. You have to
Right.
like recognize, okay, well, like the first thing we have to understand is like, what is healthcare? Because changing your gender is not healthcare. Like it is classified as healthcare, but it's not really healthcare. If you're trying to be healthy, I don't think that's the way you do it. I think that, you need those parts to be your full self, to create life. That's what we're here for. Like if human beings stop creating life, then we cease to be a species anymore. And so like I don't necessarily think that that should be a situation. I'm, again, not trying to outlaw it or anything, because people's freedoms are people's freedoms, but we don't need to apply that to the rest of society, especially when it's such a small number of people. Like those people are putting a financial burden on the rest of the country.
No, I mean, and again, that's a medical procedure, but that doesn't, again, like what is healthcare? Like you said, is it is it allowing you to live to your 80s so that you can serve in the United States Senate?
Ah,
Or is it fixing scars in your face, like, plastic surgery, like that again is a medical procedure, but that's not necessarily healthcare. That could be vanity, it could be to fix you, maybe it's a burn victim or something, and they do need some kind of plastic surgery to help them
eh,
recover and to live a life. So then does that fall as healthcare? Like, I think, that is the debate that you're saying that we need to have, where we have
right.
to suss that out and figure out the details of it, rather than just doing a blanket statement of, well, if it feels good for me, everyone needs to come along with it.
Yeah, and I think you make some good points, and I, like I said, there is a debate there to be had as to what is healthcare and what is not healthcare. And like a burn victim that needs surgeries to like kind of be able to live a full life going forward, I'd be much more willing to want that than somebody who was like, like I just really want to look like Michael Jackson. So I'm going to go get surgeries to look like Michael Jackson. And I don't even know if this is necessarily covered, but I know that other crazy stuff is covered. So maybe this would be covered too. And I wouldn't qualify that as changing your appearance, using medicine to change the way you look or what your body is not necessarily health care. How is it making you healthier? How is it caring for you?
Yeah,
All right. Well, John, it's a pretty good episode. What do you think?
it was good.
It was good. It
We've
despite
solved another two problems. So, if Kevin McCarthy wants to come on the podcast, we'll tell him what to do.
Oh my God, Kevin McCarthy. He might go down in history as the worst Speaker of the House ever. Like, I mean, it is, and then it's
I'm
bad.
sure there's been bad ones. I don't know.
Ah, God. but he is so disliked by everyone. And he just doesn't have the leadership skills to like get anything done. I don't know why they elected him.
Because no, I mean, like no one else will take the job. Sometimes it's the best you can do. Again, like it's the best worst maybe, or the worst best. I don't know how you frame that, but it just no one wants that because they know it's bad. And maybe that's why we need to expand the House and make the speakership worth holding on to again.
Yes, we do need to expand the House. But that was a topic for last week, and it'll be a topic for the future as well. We'll talk about it again. So anything coming up? We got not much going on with the Madisonians yet. We've been kind of dying down because had our last event and just trying to recuperate family life, slowing us down a little bit. But we've got some things we're working on. We'll announce later. And you got anything personal you want to talk about, John, before we peace out of here?
No, again, just thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate it. It's Jeff was asking me if I knew how many people watching the YouTube videos, and I thought it was a very small number, but then he showed me the screenshot. It's in the hundreds for some of the episodes. So I appreciate people tuning in and watching and hearing just two guys talk about how we can fix our republic.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you all, whoever you are out there who's listening or watching. We do appreciate it. Sharing is always good. And if you ever want to have questions or whatever that you want us to talk about, you can send them into the show. You can find the email in our Substack. And until next week, peace and love.